Here's my second thought for the night. I call it my theory of the three kingdoms. Now, before you go on and finish watching this movie, be aware that I'm using religious content from my religion. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and, or better known as Mormon. Now, technically, that's okay, but no, not really. Officially, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But anyway, I'm using some religious arguments in this point I'm trying to make. So if you don't want to watch it, pause the video right here and pretend you never saw it. But if you're curious, continue on. So in LDS Latter-day Saint doctrine, one of our core beliefs is the plan of salvation. That God has given us, or that before we came to earth, we were with God and He planned our existence so that way we could come to earth and learn to become like Him. After we leave this earth, once we die, we will eventually go to one of three places. They are called kingdoms. The first is the celestial kingdom. The second is the terrestrial kingdom. The third is the telestial kingdom. The way to remember that is sea turtle. Sea turtle. It's easy to get terrestrial and telestial mixed up. But the celestial is comparable to the glory of the sun. That's why it's the highest glory. Terrestrial is like the moon. It's comparable to the glory of the moon. And the telestial is like the glory of the stars. And just before I go on, it's helpful to point out that these are all relative to each other. So this is, in our scriptural text, it does compare the three kingdoms to these three astronomical bodies. But I believe these are for comparison relative to each other. For the brightness, like the sun is very bright. The moon is bright, but not as bright as the sun. The stars are bright, but not as bright as the moon or sun. Anyway, let me make my proposal. Before I do that, I want to explain a mathematical definition, which, depending on if you have learned math or not, you may or may not know. It's called an asymptote. An asymptote is a line, a hypothetical line, or a point on a graph that the function can never reach. So if you take, for example, 1 divided by x, you cannot divide by a 0. It doesn't really exist. So what happens is instead the function or your values of y will just get really, really close to 0. Whether you're going positive values of y or negative values of y, let's say positive infinity and negative infinity, and on the y-axis, you're increasingly getting really, really close to the line, but you never actually get there. You could be on the order of magnitude 10 to the negative a millionth, and you're still never there. That's what an asymptote is. You're ever approaching it, but you never quite reach it. Now, here's how it's relevant in terms of my argument. And I should probably explain one more thing too. That thing is the theory of evolving cycles. We don't just repeat things in a circle. Learn, act, do, repeat. If we just learn in a cycle, you're just going around the circle various times. You're staying flat, you're not moving. But if you improve upon the process, learn, act, do, reflect, then all of a sudden it's not just a flat circle, but rather evolving circles or evolving cycles. I prefer the term elevating cycles, but it's still the same concept. Anyway, now that you know that, now I can go forward with my proposal, my argument. My proposal is that if you reach the telestial glory, you are stuck in one-dimensional thinking. You're bound by this asymptote. You get there, and once you get there, you can never go beyond that point. There's a good scripture in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 7. Ever learning, but never coming to a knowledge of the truth. If you hit the celestial kingdom, you basically forever limit your eternal glory. And please be aware that I'm speaking from a religious perspective. So I'm not saying you have to believe this. I'm just presenting it as a possibility or as a new way of looking at things. Essentially, if you hit the lowest kingdom, you've hit an asymptote. You can learn and learn and learn and learn, but you can never get above that asymptote. Ever learning, ever approaching, never able to come to a knowledge, never able to cross the asymptote. It's similar if you get to the terrestrial glory. If you reach here, you reach two-dimensional thinking. But in either case, you're still limited by an upper asymptote. Now, you could go lower if you wanted to, but I wouldn't advise that. Basically, you get here, and you can go forever in either direction. Positive, infinitely negative, or infinitely positive. You'll just never quite get there. Again, ever learning, but never coming to a knowledge of the truth, or a complete knowledge of the truth. Now, if you reach the celestial glory, that means you've learned to overcome the limits of the asymptotes. How did we do that? We practiced the method of elevating cycles. Because look what happens with the cycles. If your asymptote is like this, your cycle just goes around it. Or I can write this out. Here's our rod, and here's our cycling around it. Basically, you've learned if you can obtain celestial glory, or if you do, it means you've learned three-dimensional thinking or higher. You've learned to overcome the limits of the asymptotes in so much that they're no longer a problem. Anyway, something to think about. If you reach celestial glory, that's where you'll be able to continue your learning forever. If you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, here's an interesting scripture to consider. It is a scripture mastery, by the way. Doctrine and Covenants, section 131. In the celestial glory there are 3 heavens or degrees. And in order to attain the highest, a man must enter into this order of the priesthood, meaning the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. And if he doesn't, he cannot obtain it. He may enter into the other, but that is the end of his kingdom. No mas. He cannot have an increase. What I interpret from this scripture is that once you hit telestial or terrestrial, you're basically limited by the upper asymptotes. You forever limit your ability to learn and develop growing in knowledge. But if you reach celestial glory, you can continue to develop and continue to gain more and more knowledge. Post in the comments below what your thoughts are. Good night.